All right, okay. Whoa, my clock already started. They started my clock. My name is Jamie Cassup. I am the global evangelist, education evangelist at Google. And I live here in Phoenix. How many of you are not from Phoenix? Awesome, welcome to Phoenix. Make sure you go down to Tempe and visit some of the great restaurants down there, like La Boca, great pizza and wine bar. And then if you want some good Mexican food, there's the Cantina is right on Mill. That takes care of my sponsorship for the day. Get a couple free meals out of that. No, I'm serious. Just make sure you go down there. It's a great community. So welcome to Phoenix. I'm excited about this conference because I live here in Phoenix. And, well, actually, technically, I live on airplanes, but I spend my weekends here in Phoenix. I should say that, right? So welcome. I want to kind of cover about 3.5 hours of material in about 30 minutes. So if all of a sudden I start breaking into Spanish, you'll know why, because I want to get through this pretty quickly. Some contact information. You can find me on Twitter. I'm pretty active. I talk about announcements and things that are going on. Google Plus, obviously, I have a page there, and again, announcements, articles, things that are happening in our space, things that are happening in the education space that we think are important. And then I also have a blog that I write about education, a lot of the things that I talk about. Now, these are the things that I'm going to try to kind of cover in the next 25 minutes or so. I'm going to try to leave a couple of minutes for questions. If not, at the end, you want to come up and chat, we can do that as well. I got about 20 minutes after the talk. I always like to start with the why. Why are we involved in education? I hear this from educators all the time, and I talk to folks that are interested in education. It's for the kids because of what we can do in the education space. But for me personally, my passion comes from the belief, the 100% belief that education disrupts poverty, that it changes a family's destiny in one generation, and that we all benefit from that. And I know this because I grew up in Hell's Kitchen in New York, so I'm a first-generation American, or like how we like to say here in Arizona, I'm an anchor baby. And I was born in New York. My mother came from Argentina. I grew up on welfare, you know, all the stereotypes of the deals and the kids that John was just talking about in his presentation about reaching those kids. I'm one of those kids, and now I have two of my own kids. I have a 20-year-old and an 11-year-old. This is the part you're supposed to say that I don't look like I have a 20-year-old. She's actually going to be 21 soon, which scares the crap out of me, but that's a whole other problem. So here she is. She's in her second year of college. Most of my money now is going to Michael Crow that you heard this morning. She's at ASU and doing great, fantastic, but she never asked me if she had to go to college. She just assumed she was going to college. I never told her she had to go to college. And one of the interesting things is that she wants to just study and be good at what she does, and she assumes she's going to graduate school because I went to graduate school. She also assumes that I'm paying for it, but you know, that's a good problem to have, right? I mean, that's the point. My kids are fine, and I benefit from that. My kids benefit from that, but more importantly, society benefits from that. So that's the power of education that we can bring into our communities, and that's what's really exciting. The problem is that the gap in the last 40 years, and Michael talked about this morning, is actually not only not getting better, it's getting worse, right? If you look at the data, all the social science data in terms of kids that are rich versus kids that are poor, you can see that the gap's actually growing. You know, by the time a kid is 4 years old, by the time a poor kid is 4 years old, they are already 18 months behind academically than a rich kid. If you look at poor fourth graders, 6 out of 10 aren't doing math at level. And even kids that actually get through high school and graduate and go to college, only 30% of the bottom quadrant even apply to college, and only 15% of those graduate from college. So you can see that number is growing and getting worse. And if you're Latino, and as a Latino, I'm concerned about this community, but as Americans, we should all be concerned about this community because, you know, by the time 2020 comes around, 1 in 4 kids in our K-12 system is going to be Latino. And when you look at this promise or this kind of goal that President Obama set last year about getting us to be that #1 country again in college graduates, what most people don't realize when you look at this goal is that more than half of the 9 million degrees that we're going to need are going to have to be earned by Latino students, right? And that's a huge number when you think about the fact that right now, between the ages of those that are 16 to 24, if you're Latino, it's a 17.6% dropout rate versus a 9% dropout rate for African Americans or 5% dropout rate for white Americans, you can see that number is never going to catch up to this, especially by 2020. And when you think about most of those of us who are Latino who have a college degree or more, there's only 13% of us that are walking around, right? So this is a very serious issue that we have to deal with. But I'm extremely optimistic because for most of history, where you were born, who you were born into, the family that you were born into, the resources that you had, and your proximity to libraries had a huge determinant on your academic success, a huge factor in whether or not you would be successful academically. And I know this personally because, growing up in Hell's Kitchen, we had a library on 50th Street and 10th Avenue, the Columbus Library, that all the schools had to use. So when the schools closed at 3 o'clock, we had to use this big library. Sorry, this small library. And with a couple of tables in the room, no books, no resources, that was our information source. But now what? The information is at our fingertips, right? The world's information is at our fingertips. And that's exciting because when we think about what's possible, we're only beginning to think about what we can accomplish with this. And this isn't just a US phenomenon, this is a global phenomenon, right? When you think about what's going on in the world, half of the 2 billion internet users, half of the folks that are using the web are coming from developing countries. They're coming from places like China and India and Argentina and Mexico and Brazil. So this is where our internet users are coming from. As a matter of fact, if you look at the data, 73% of those who use the web don't speak English as their first language, right? So we think of the web as this American thing, but the world doesn't see it that way, right? So the web is this place that people are going to, and the growth rate for these developing countries is 25%. So 25% growth rate for these countries in terms of use of the internet in their lives, in their everyday lives. And when you try to dig into that and figure out where is that coming from, you realize that the motivating, or what's motivating that, what's happening in that space are young people, right? So when people ask me all the time, what's the next disruptor? What's the next technology that's going to disrupt things? My answer is that it's not a technology, it's young people. Young people are the new disruptors of what's happening in the space. And you can see that from what's going on with the web. And we look at the kids using the web as a separate thing. And I always ask this in my presentations, how many of you have not used the web today? Anyone? Right. Right? So most of us are using the web before we get out of bed, right? It's like the new cigarette. We fire that thing up right in the morning before our feet touch the ground. We're on the web, right? How many of you are guilty of that? My wife's sitting over there. She's guilty of that. She does that every morning, right? So we do that all the time. That we're on the web, and if you think about how fast that happened, it wasn't that long ago that we used to have to call the web with our home phones, right? And the web was rude. It would hang up on us. And it would give us multiple numbers to try to reach the web. It was like, being 17 in high school, going after that hot girl in school. It just was always elusive. You would never be able to get on it. And our reward, when we finally got on, was these web pages that had words with links that had words to other links. And we were so excited about that. And that was, and then somebody would walk into the kitchen and pick up the yellow phone and knock you off the web, and you would lose your mind. But now we lose our mind when our 4 or 5 devices can't connect to the web wherever we are, right? Or we're on airplanes and we're frustrated because there's no Wi-Fi on the airplane. So think about that in terms of where we are today and where we were 10 years ago and where we're going 10 years from today. Imagine, whenever I plug in my computer, whenever I have to recharge my phone, I think about how they're going to laugh at us in 30 years that we used to have to do that, right? So that's where we are today. So when you think about this generation of kids, this disruptive technology, which are young people, this group of kids are born into this world, right? This is a generation of kids where technology is just part of their life. So that new shiny object that you have, that tablet, that smartphone, that cool thing, that new Chromebook that you have, all those devices that you have, those are just devices to these kids. These are tools. These are resources to these kids. There's nothing special about them. So your new, cool, shiny device is the oldest technology that these kids will ever know. It's the worst technology they'll ever see. It's their Commodore 64. Right? They're going to go to thrift stores. They're going to be living in Pittsburgh and in San Francisco in their 20s, and they're going to go to thrift stores and find your cool technology and put it up in their apartment like it's like a museum piece, right? Because they're going to remember how they used to use this when they were 4 or 5 years old. This is the generation of kids that are going through our school systems, and we are not ready for this generation of kids, not even a little bit. And when you think about this generation of kids, they're not necessarily different than we are. And you'll hear speakers talk all the time about how this generation of kids is different than the way we grew up, or they're multitaskers, and their brains are wired differently. No, they're not. They're just like us. Evolution hasn't evolved in the last 10 years. Right? What they do is they do 4 things poorly. Right? And so we have to focus on making sure that they're concentrating on their tasks. But how they learn how to do things is different than the way we learn how to do things. And that's fundamentally true, and we have to focus on that how they learn how to do things is different than the way we learn how to do things. This is a picture of my, well, soon-to-be 12-year-old. Oh, he's 12 now. Sorry, he just turned 12. This is a picture of my 12-year-old. I'm sitting next to him on the couch here, trying to be an American, a good, patriotic, lazy American on a Sunday and watch football. And I turn to my left and I see this. So I got up and took a picture of him. This is during this football season. He's on one machine over here. He's playing Minecraft, this new game that he just discovered. How many of you are familiar with Minecraft? Right. There's going to be Minecraft rehab centers all over the country in 20 years. So he's over here playing Minecraft. He's just discovered this game. And on his Chromebook, he's watching videos learning how to play Minecraft. Right? And this is how he this is how he learns. This is how he does things. And he's gone from this to now collaborating, communicating, problem solving, working with others. And I catch it, he's in my office on the weekends, and he's talking to 5 or 6 different kids, and they're planning, and they're strategizing, they're doing all these different things. And I feel like I'm a parent, I'm supposed to walk in there and say, stop doing that, go outside and play with a stick. I mean, like, what are we supposed to do with this generation of kids? Because he's gone from this to now creating videos, teaching other kids how to play Minecraft, to programming games, where he's programming games inside Minecraft for other kids, to the point where I was in London doing an interview with the BBC, which is, a big deal, and the guy I'm talking to, realizes that he's got an 11-year-old, I have an 11-year-old, we're changing information, and I'm like, oh, what server does your kid play on? Oh, let me text my kid, see what server he plays, they should connect. And I'm standing here thinking, I'm global networking for my 11-year-old. This is the generation of kids that are going in through our school system, and they want to do and they want to learn. They don't know that learning happens Monday through Friday between this time and this time. They don't understand why they have to learn things in the way that we prescribe that they have to learn things, when they want to be able to do anything, anywhere that they want, right? So this is the generation of kids that are growing up in an environment where family time can be done this way, right? We also have to focus on the fact that this is a generation of kids that are going to have to solve a lot of problems that we're going to be defining for them and that they need to discover and define. And so we got to make sure that we focus on building the right skill set. Normally I'll go into this whole thing about the skill sets that they need, but you guys know what they are, right? The problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration. And when we mean collaboration, it's not just working with others. We have to teach kids how to learn from one another, right? I mean, Dennis Rodman and Michael Jordan worked together. I'm sure they never talked to each other, right? We have to teach kids how to work together so that they can learn from each other, so that they can take someone else's idea and change their mind. Changing your mind is a skill set that we all need to build, right? To listen to someone else's expertise, to listen to someone else's point of view and say, you know what, you're right, I changed my mind, right? And being able to collaborate in that sense so that you can create for the greater good. And when we talk about things like critical thinking and collaboration, it's important to realize that these are things across, and John talked about the academic part of it. These are the skills that they have to learn while they're doing this. And no longer does the teacher have to be the black box that has all the information that distributes information to the kids. The kids have the information, so we have to realize, again, that the information is at our fingertips, and what we have to do is focus on how do we turn that information into intelligence, right? So that's the role of the teacher, is converting information into intelligence, because we don't have to give kids information. My kid come up to me all the time. William will come up to me and ask me a question, and if I know he can look it up, I don't answer the question. I say, go look it up. I actually say, you know, I work for a search engine. I'm not actually the search engine. And I say, go look it up. But then it's my responsibility to follow up. It's my responsibility to say, what did you find? What does it mean? How do you apply it to what you're trying to learn? What's the source? Those types of things. We need to teach kids how to vet and make sense of the information that they find. And it's our responsibility to get them to the place where they really, really want to understand something deeply. And so I don't give my kid any credit, and we shouldn't be giving kids credit for information that they can find. We should be giving them credit for information that they turn into intelligence, right? And that's a completely different mindset of how to look at this. And so what we're seeing is this shift in the paradigm, and a paradigm shift to the web. And we're starting to see this, and I work with lots of school districts. I get to travel around the world, and I get to see lots of schools. I get to see lots of districts doing some amazing things. And John talked about some pockets of excellence, and I think this is expanding, and we're starting to see some of this. In higher education, we're seeing this with MOOCs. And we have this perfect storm of things that are going on in higher education, where the web is maturing, right? It's no longer a page that has links to words that have links to other words, but it's maturing, and it's only going to get better. We have a generation of kids that are comfortable living on the web, with sharing their resources and managing their resources on the web. We have some technology that's available. You all have different technologies, and you're accessing the web in different ways. And they're getting cheaper. And then we have broadband, where you can actually have 4 or 5 devices on at the same time. So all these things are factoring into this space around MOOCs. But what I'm interested in with MOOCs is that when you think about what's the potential with MOOCs, is that for the longest time we took poor kids, those that scored really well on tests, those that did really well in school, and then we try to take them and put them in the great schools. And we need to do this because the model that we currently have, that's what leads to success, right? If you're a poor kid and you have good grades and you get a good SAT score and you go to an elite school, there's an 89% chance of you graduating. If you are a poor kid, get good grades and get a great SAT score and go to a local school or go to a less school than that, there's a 50% chance of you graduating. So yeah, it made sense that we need to take these kids and put them in these schools, but now we can bring these schools to these kids. And that's what I'm excited about with the whole idea of MOOCs, is how do we bring this really, really good content to kids, so instead of us trying to always bring the kid to the school. So I'm excited about MOOCs. In the K-12 space, what we're seeing is this generation of teachers that are creating the new models for what learning is going to look like. So you're starting to see this with flipped classrooms, blended learning, distance learning, all these common denominators. All this is the common denominator is the web, right? The web brings you the opportunity to be able to do this in lots of different ways, and we're starting to see this. Now, what's exciting for us is that we're seeing this happen across the board with some of our tools, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But this is the Passaic School District in New Jersey. 95% reduced lunch or free lunch population. 25 to 50% of their kids do not have internet access at home, right? And so there's a failing school in New Jersey. They went out and decided that they needed cultural change. They need to shift what they're doing in that school, and they utilize the web as much as possible. So all of a sudden now they can actually look at the world in a different way, and the culture is changing the school. So now they're utilizing the web in lots of different ways. They brought Chromebooks in, but that's not the point. The point is that they're utilizing the web in ways that are amazing, but creating that culture of innovation. And the kids are learning at a completely different pace than they were learning before. In Leiden, a school district that I know very well, that I work with, they've taken the whole idea of the web. The principal there said, listen, the web is the new platform. We're going to jump on that and utilize it as much as possible. And they've been able to create some offspring programs from that, including now a tech department, a tech support department that's made up of students. And the students are getting skills, and they're teaching teachers, and they're helping teachers, and now they're doing that professional development for teachers and being there to support the teachers. And so they got these great web-based internship programs that are going on at their school. Or in Richland 2 School District, that I got a chance to talk to all their kids at some point. These they're doing a completely different model where when you walk into a classroom, you don't even know where the teacher is, right? You can't find a teacher because there's chaotic chaos happening, in that classroom where these groups of kids are doing this basic learning over here, these kids are advanced and they're doing this, and the teacher's working with this individual in the corner. So much so that they've created a model where when visitors come into the classroom and they're getting lots of visitors, one of the kids will pop up, come over to their door, and say, "Hi, you're in our history class. We're learning about the American Revolution," and then go back to their seat, right? That's how chaotic the whole environment is, and it's brilliant to watch and to see what's going on in that space. And the whole idea of how do we use the web to level the playing field, and how do we use it to bring information at our fingertips, realizing that today a kid has more information at their fingertips than the President of the United States had 20 years ago, right? Completely different model of looking at. So the web from a Google perspective, we're finding our schools using our tools, and we've got to realize that we don't build tools for education, right? We build tools at scale on a billion number scale, right? So our tools are used by everyone. They just happen to work really well in education, just like they happen to work well in other industries, just like they happen to work well for you as an individual. So we have Google Apps for Education, which is playing that communication collaboration piece for lots of schools, and lots of folks, and lots of you guys who are programmers and developers are building things on top of Google Apps so that schools can integrate and use both at the same time in what they're trying to do with their learning objectives. We have YouTube for schools, recognizing that YouTube is a great tool, but not being utilized in education very much. And we realized why is partly the content that was on there, mostly the comment section. I mean, I read through some of those comments, and I have no idea who these people are, but we recognized that we wanted to bring educational videos to students and teachers, and I like to say that, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, what's a great education video worth? And so being able to use that content in schools, and how do we integrate that? And so we created YouTube for schools, and it's just education videos that teachers use. And we're not determining that they're education videos. We have a whole group of teachers that are determining that these are education videos. And so we have a whole vetting process that we use that categorizes the channels that we have and the content that we have. And so you can plug in as a school district. Let's say you're afraid of YouTube and you don't want to use YouTube. You can plug in YouTube for schools, and you're not on YouTube. You're on YouTube for schools, and there's no comments, there's no related videos. It's all education videos. So we brought education videos into the school system. We have, devices like Chromebooks that help you manage and scale, recognizing we took a basic idea that says, if the web is the platform, why are we dealing with the middleman? Let's get the middleman out of the way, and let's put the web in front of people and let them utilize that. And then on the back end, the benefit is we can manage and scale, where you don't have to worry about re-imaging devices, or how do you load them, or charging them up, or plugging them into carts, or they just work. And so they update themselves, they take care of themselves. They're like a good cat. And then we have the tablets, where if you want that kind of format to be able to touch and feel, I get asked all the time, should my kids use tablets, or should my kids use laptops, or should my kids do this, or my kids do that? My answer is all of it, right? All right? How many of you just pick one device when you walk out the door? But we can't do that, and so I recognize that there is this value in figuring out what's a good device for the learning that you're trying to do in a specific grade level versus learning that you're trying to do in a higher grade level, for example. So we have, content and apps and books available through our tablet devices. We're working on the Wonders project. I don't know if you're familiar with Google Wonders, where we're bringing the world's information to your fingertips. And so kids are able to visit anywhere in the world and see what happened in that country, see how the country looks like today versus what it looked like in the past. It's really exciting to be able to travel around the world like this. Or the Google Art project that brings every piece of art to your fingertips. Even if we were absolutely the hugest art fans in the world, you would never be able to go visit every single museum in all 40 countries. And we have these great partnerships where we have brushstroke level detail of art. And kids can actually go in there and create their own collection of art, right? So you can actually, and you should try it. It's fun. For those of you who have always wanted a Picasso or something, you can go in there and create your own, multi-billion-dollar collection of art and call it your own, right? And so you have that ability to go in there and look at art that way. Or being able to do Google Hangouts with astronauts. So the Hangouts are this huge tool that are taking off. It's taking off in higher education. In K-12, a little bit at a time, but the whole idea of being able to do Hangouts where the expectation that kids are going to have is that they should be able to talk to an astronaut at any time that they want, right? So if they're going to learn about space, shouldn't they be able to talk to an astronaut? And so shouldn't they just be able to call an astronaut at any time and just talk to them? Those are the expectations that we're setting with our kids. But the important thing here to remember is that we're just getting started. I don't know if you've had a chance to visit the Chrome experiments or if any of you have Chrome experiments up there. I'd love to know if you do. But the whole idea of what we can do with the web is just beginning, right? We're just getting started with the possibility of what's possible. And you're starting to see this in the Chrome experiments where we're seeing developers use open source code, use some of the development tools that are available, and are bending the edges of what the web can do and bending the possibilities of what's possible. But the message that I kind of want to leave you is the idea that we're just getting started with the possibilities of the web. And how do you develop towards a model that looks like you're going to be able to predict what 2 years from now looks like, or what 5 years from now looks like, or what 10 years from now look like. So I'm excited to be here. I'm going to be here for the rest of the day. I have 3 minutes for any questions that you guys might have. And thank you very much. Questions? You know, whenever I ask a 4th grade class, this is my favorite thing. Whenever I ask a 4th grade class, are there any questions? Every single hand in the room goes up. I just think that's fascinating that we're shyer than 4th graders. Clock's ticking. 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
So Jamie,
yeah.
Jamie, what's the most? You're seeing all this stuff all the time. I'm just curious. You did a great job, just dumping a lot of information on us. And it would be fun to hear more if you had more time. But what's the most innovative thing or mind-blowing thing you've seen right now? Is there anything that you've shared with us or that you haven't shared that you're even dumbfounded by as you're seeing all these different things? You're in classrooms, and right. That's the space that I am intimately involved with. Mm-hmm. What does it excite you right now?
Yeah, so what excites me, believe it or not, and I make fun of it all the time, is Minecraft, right? Minecraft blows me away, and so I always try to dig into the why. What's about Minecraft that has my kid like trembling when he's not on it? Right. Now, the first time I saw it, I'm like, hang on, let me show you better graphics than that on my 2600 Atari games, right? And so it's not the graphics, right? It's not the user and ability. It's none of that. What it is an open playground, right? It's open and it's problem solving. Like I'm a big fan of ST Math, for example, right? So what ST Math is doing is the same thing. They just give you a picture with something that you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to figure out what to do. I think kids want to figure out what to do, right? And I think that Minecraft gives them that ability to figure out what to do. So I think I've seen that kind of space blow up, and that kind of open environment is where some interesting things might possibly happen, where we try to prescribe too much as opposed to leaving things open for exploration.
Jamie, one of the things I've been wondering about is a lot of the trends you mentioned sort of are free in a big sense. MOOCs is in particular. It's about bringing education at a very, very low price point to everyone. Uh-huh. How do you see that disrupting the higher ed space and specifically monetization of education, which is what really funds a lot of the research and developments that we as a society can actually invest in?
And I think Michael Crow, I don't know if you got a chance to listen to Michael Crow this morning, but he talked a little bit about this and the idea of what's going on in space. I mean, he hits it right on the head when he talks about how the fact that these MOOCs haven't really been able to produce kids with with degrees, right? And so what's stopping that? And so I think that in higher education space, and why you're seeing the web take a better hold in K-12 than in higher education is that in higher education, you still have experts, right, that know stuff. And so, I think about that New York Times model. I mean, all of us bitched and complained when the New York Times started charging a subscription for digital content, and then I still signed up, right? it's being able to provide that really valuable content. And same thing in the K-12 space, because it's happening where you're seeing digital textbook or textbooks become digital, and all of a sudden it'll be content. I think we should pay for good content. So hopefully what happens is that the value of the content and how we pay for that content makes the content get better, makes it more interactive. Like, you know, I think that there's opportunity to be able to do that. And you think about, we can learn from other industries, right? So what happened in the music industry? What happened in the movie industry? What happened in banking? What happened in business? What happened in politics, right? There's still people making money. There's still things happening. What's happening in those spaces? How did the web disrupt those industries, and how did they adjust? I think we can learn a lot from what's happening in those spaces. I got time for one more. All right, right there.
Jamie, you talked a lot about how children are learning differently today and how the web is enabling learning, but we also know that learning doesn't stop in the classroom and that it has a community context. And sort of, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the opportunities for sort of intentional pathways or handoffs between formal and informal learning that the web might enable when you think of it from an ecological perspective. Like, a kid lives in a community, they go to a school, they can go to the library, they can have an app, they can talk to their parents, and how, from your perspective, you would look at the opportunities available to enable learning.
Yeah, and so I got 30 seconds left, so I'll answer it quickly. But the whole idea, and I talk to superintendents all the time, and they say, you know, what's your number one issue? Virtual learning, virtual learning, virtual learning. And then, you know, I get up and I say, what the hell's virtual learning, right? You're either learning or you're not learning, right? There's no pretend learning, right? And so the whole idea of virtual learning doesn't make any sense to me. So I think learning is learning. How that learning happens, I think at the end of the day is gonna, I'll leave you with this final thought, is what's gonna happen one day when organizations like Google or even some small startup can do our own assessments as to what your knowledge, skills, and abilities are. And where you went to school and where you got your degree won't matter anymore, right? And so when you think about it from that perspective, learning is going to happen in lots of different formats and lots of different ways. And I think we'll see learning in different things, where before my generation was like, oh, I got my college degree, I've learned everything I need to learn, now I can go on to conquer the world. Where I'm always going to not need to update my knowledge, skills, and abilities is going to create a model where learning is going to happen all the time, and you're going to look for different learning opportunities. All right, I'm over. Thank you guys very much.